Welcome to Green Team Speaks To, the podcast for the Paulson Institute's Green Finance Center. Hello, I'm Deborah Lair, Vice Chairman and Executive Director at the Paulson Institute. Today, we'll be speaking with Ibrahim Al-Zu'bi and John Arentz of Majid Al Futtaim. Ibrahim is the company's Chief Sustainability Officer, and John is Head of Treasury, and both have been instrumental in the company's sustainability efforts. Many thanks, Ibrahim and John, for joining us on this episode. Majid Al Futtaim is a leading integrated lifestyle provider operating retail and leisure establishments in 16 markets in the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia, serving over 560 million visitors a year. With such a far-reaching platform, your actions send a strong message to others in the region about the importance of using market mechanisms to promote green development. With all the exciting and interesting things that Majid Al Futtaim is doing and how it fits into the larger regional context and the broader climate action dialogue, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Your firm has been one of the leaders in the region and an inspiration for others. John, why don't we start with you to give us an overview of the firm?
Thanks very much, Deborah. Majid Al Futtaim as an organisation has been around for over 25 years now, growing from a shopping mall here in Dubai to now owning over 27 shopping malls across the GCC. Now, as an organisation, we are a very diverse organisation, and as you rightly talk about, we are a lifestyle conglomerate. We cover industries such as property, where we own shopping malls, hotels, and we have some residential development, to a retail business, which is our Carrefour supermarkets and hypermarkets business that has obviously a significant reach across 16 countries with more than 320 stores. The last piece of our business is what we call our ventures business. And within that, we have cinemas, leisure and entertainment, fashion, and some finance. Now, the biggest part of that is the cinema business, which is our Vox cinema business. And we have over 500 screens across the area. It is obviously a business that is very customer centric, and we continue to explore how we can integrate ourselves with the lives of our customers on an ongoing basis. It is something that we're very proud to do across the different countries that we operate in, and predominantly, obviously, we have our base here in Dubai.
Well, thanks so much. Well, clearly, the firm is a corporate leader in the Middle East and Africa, and it's also at the forefront of the beginnings of the sustainability movement in the region. Your region has been a little slower than some in embracing sustainability for very understandable reasons, given the reliance on the oil revenues and the extreme climate conditions. But it seems to be catching on now. Ibrahim, turning to you, can you share with us what the vision of the firm is in the field of sustainability, and what is it that you're hoping to achieve?
Thank you, Deborah, for the question. Sustainability is embedded in the heart of everything we do. It's embedded in the day-to-day business. Our sustainability journey started officially in 2011, and so far we have achieved many important milestones along this journey. Our vision is to dare today, change tomorrow. When it comes to our sustainability strategy, and what we've done, we made sure to align with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Our vision and strategy is directly aligned with 10 of the 17 SDGs. And when it comes to a strategy itself, it has three focus areas related, of course, to the strategy and the business objectives, as well as things that we are either being impacted by or we can have a positive impact. The three focus areas are transforming lives, rethinking resources, and empowering our people. So our approach is a triple bottom line approach: planet, profit, people. It's a win-win for the planet, for us, for the economy, and for the people, for sure. I would like just to share a highlight when it comes to rethinking resources. When we were one of the first global companies to commit to net zero, but we decided to go beyond. We believe that being carbon neutral or just net zero is not enough. We have a net positive commitment in carbon and water, where we were the first company in the Middle East, and I believe one of few globally, to commit to become net positive by 2040. Net positive means to give to the environment more than you take. So when we measured our negative environmental impact, we found it mainly in energy, in carbon and water. And then when we decided to be net positive by 2040. And the target, regardless we achieve the target or not, we have a clear journey since 2016 on how we want to achieve this net positive target by investing in energy efficiency, have a climate mitigation strategy and a climate adaptation strategy, as well as thinking in a different design when it comes to our buildings and our assets to ensure that it is an efficient and green building, as well as investing on in-site renewable generation and off-site renewable energy generation. And this way, we managed to embed the way of thinking, the way we design. We design by default for a LEED Gold shopping mall or a hotel or a mixed-use project or equivalent. So the norm for us is a LEED Gold, as well as implementing, as per our renewable energy policy, a 5% minimum, 7.5% for a new project from renewable generation. I believe this is a new business model, at least for this part of the world, when you look at business as usual. The business as usual for us should be, and for everyone, sustainable business. So when it comes to if we achieve some of the targets, the strategy gets translated into annual targets, long term and short term, as well as key performance indicators, and gets audited by third party auditor quarterly. So just to give you a brief on 2019, for example, we achieved around 14 million kilowatt hour of renewables generated by shopping malls through photovoltaics. We achieved a 42% reduction in carbon emissions in one of our biggest Carrefours in Mall of the Emirates. A good example, 34% reduction in water use in our Hilton Garden in Dubai, as well as achieving a 71% water use reduction in our offices. And it goes beyond, by the way, when it comes also in our retail business and our operations as well. In November last year, we became the first company in the Middle East and North Africa to commit to phase out single-use plastics from our operations by 2025. And we are on track. We introduced incentives, reusable bags, and we're looking for alternatives. And this will include the removal of freely distributed plastic grocery bags from all our Carrefour stores in 15 markets by 2025. We also manage and own and operate more than 2.5 million square meters of area of green certified space, as well as working, of course, with my colleague and good friend John in Treasury, where we established with Treasury in 2019 our Green Finance Framework and Green Finance Steering Committee chaired by John to oversee the selection of new and existing projects in our green portfolio. Just to wrap up about the sustainability journey, and this is very close to my heart because it's getting the ESG rating because we use international framework to be rated. So when it comes to ESG rating, we received a low risk rating by Sustainalytics, which is an independent ESG auditor, as well as rated A by the Morgan Stanley Sustainability Index.
Well, Ibrahim, thank you for that overview. It's clear that Majid Al Futtaim has a very broad ranging sustainability program. What has been the reaction in the region to the work that you're doing?
Thank you. That's a very good question because we do have a regional footprint. And again, our region faces a unique set of natural and operational, political, geopolitical, and social challenges, by the way, and especially in adopting sustainability when it comes to priorities. It's one of the most scarce regions when it comes to water, when it comes to environmental performance. Some of the countries we don't score well, although UAE is leading there as well. When it comes to consumption, we do consume a lot. For example, the typical UAE resident uses around 450 plastic water bottles on an average in a single year. So we use a lot of water, we use a lot of plastic, single-use plastics. Sustainable infrastructure still is a growing priority in the region, especially when it comes to renewables. The UAE has a strategic plan when it comes to sustainability. So, in a nutshell, the evolution of sustainability in this part of the world became from a nice to have and it's becoming to a must do thing. And this is especially post COVID 19. COVID 19 was an eye opener and still an eye opener for governments here about issues like environmental sustainability, well being, infrastructure, local sustainable procurement, local procurement. So it's becoming more and more important. We started discussions with different stakeholders, mainly governments, on local procurements, investing more in SMEs, infrastructure, renewables, as well as well-being. So it's a journey for us, and we are in talks and supporting even different initiatives. For example, the UAE government asked us to join a federal council on climate change. It's a cabinet council, climate change and environment, to give feedback and lessons learned and start to implement some of our policies on a government level, as well as the Board of Circular Economy 360, which is part of the Fourth Industrial Revolution Center done by the United Arab Emirates government and the World Economic Forum. We are in touch even beyond the Middle East. In Armenia, for example, our single-use plastic commitment inspired the government to look into implementing elimination by next year, as well as countries like Kenya. Kenya, we are working with not only local sourcing, we're working with local farmers to help the government with reducing their subsidies when it comes to opening markets for the local products. So there is an interest, and now post COVID-19, I believe that business will look into a must-have sustainable policies there. What we learned from COVID-19 is agility, being agile and resilient is a survival skill. And being a sustainability practitioner, I've been working on a pandemic called climate change. So if someone shows resilience and agility, will be organizations that have been looking into climate change mitigation and adaptation by default. And this is where you will see the direction goes and the investment. You see companies and investors looking into social investments, green investments, which from a risk assessment and even compliance and customers would demand that as well. So the region is going in the right direction from a government perspective. We started to see even more private business looking into sustainable commitments, privately owned companies. They want to leave a sustainable legacy. So the challenge will be mainly is the natural resources, and mainly I would say water, as well as the movement of legislations, sustainable legislations across closely connected countries.
Ibrahim, yeah, I think you raised a really important point, and that is as many of the economies around the world are suffering from this post-COVID environment with the shutdown of so many businesses, many really are looking at how they can have a green recovery and using this as an opportunity to build out whole new sectors. We found in our experience in China that many of these activities really need to go hand in hand between business and government. There needs to be a good government regulatory structure to promote sustainability, but providing the opportunity and impetus for businesses to take advantage of that. That's very clear in the financial sector, where there have been incentives created for firms to start looking at how they can build innovative financial tools to promote green development. John, turning to you, we've been very aware green bonds, which has been one of the fastest growing fields within the bond market and green finance market, but not a lot of issuances of green sukuks. You've had a very significant milestone in that with last year's issuance of the first green sukuk in the GCC region by a corporation. Tell us a little about Islamic green finance and then what was the thought behind issuing a green sukuk?
Thanks, Deborah. I think one of the things that's very key is that obviously when we talk about Sukuk, There really isn't a lot of difference between a sukuk and a bond. They act in exactly the same way. Yes, a sukuk is done under Islamic law or Islamic compliance. In other words, under Islam, you can't have interest, so it talks about profit rates. Obviously, they act in exactly the same way. So, from the perspective of do you choose to do a sukuk or a bond, it really comes down to how you're looking at the markets at the time. And for an organisation such as ourselves operating in the GCC, there's obviously an underlying demand benefit to actually looking at a sukuk versus doing a bond. So, obviously you increase the range of investors that you can actually get to engage in your issuance. In looking at green, obviously Ibrahim has spoken significantly about what we have done here as an organisation when it comes to sustainability. For me, as a finance person, and I came from a background where I was a treasurer for an organisation in Australia that was considered globally to be, at the top of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for property companies in the world, to be number one or number two for a number of years. And coming from an organisation like that that had a strong sustainability background, I did issue the first green corporate bond out of Australia into Europe back in 2014. This organisation speaks a lot to me around sustainability. Being able to bring all of that together to issue something and to make it regional, I think was a fantastic thing to do. The biggest issue, I think, for a lot of the market, and obviously Europe is more sophisticated and advanced in its way of thinking about sustainability and green in particular, is education for people and what does it actually mean. So for us to be able to go through and lever off what Ibrahim and his team had already done was a huge step in the right direction for us as a finance or a treasury to come in and look at this and go, well, we can actually lever off this to produce something that's a first for the region, to drive the initiative of sustainability, not just within our business, but within the UAE and within the GCC. To the point where I represent Majid Al Futtaim on the Dubai Sustainable Finance Working Group, and how do we actually try to drive, I guess, more issuance? As you rightly point out, there's not a lot, but how do we bring more companies to market? Not just companies or corporates, but also governments as well. And obviously, this year we did see Egypt come to market with a green offering. It's very key that when you're looking at sustainability and trying to tie it to finance, is trying to bring something to the market that investors are going to understand. Now, Ibrahim did touch on the ESG rating through Sustainalytics, and that was part of our process. And in financing for bonds or a sukuk, you also need to have, from a market perspective, a green financing framework, something that international investors are going to understand. And obviously, the key one for that is the ICMA, or International Capital Markets Association, Green Bond Principles. Very, very key. That's something that everybody understands and can relate to, that if you're bringing something to market that's in line with those, and it's been third-party verified, and that's where Sustainalytics comes in, not just on the ESG rating, but also on the framework that you're going to use to bring a product to market that everyone is going to recognise and accept. And that goes down to, how do you screen for eligible assets? What is the process around that? How do we arrive at the eligible assets? What is the ongoing reporting going to be? And to me, that is probably one of the biggest keys of how you actually drive acceptance of a product like this, is reporting on what you're actually doing and on the assets or the projects that you've selected. So for us, the two issuances that we did last year in Green Sukuk were focused on green buildings, and we have about 13 or 14 buildings that met the criteria under ICMA for green buildings, and that is obviously under the LEED or BREEAM standards. For LEED, it's gold and above, or BREEAM, it's very good and above. So Ibrahim and his team have done a fantastic job in looking at those assets and already having them verified under those standards that we could use as the building planks for the issuance. The reporting of those then is to the point of, well, what are you actually delivering to the world in regards to sustainability and the impact that that's having? So that covers things such as the energy efficiency, what's the avoided greenhouse gas emissions for a year, what are your annual energy savings, what's the reduction in water consumption? So that when you produce that report on an annual basis, and the investors that are out there that are very focused just on green, can actually see that you are actually doing some good. And that obviously helps them within their allocations. The market is one that is growing significantly, and it's going to continue to grow. even if you're not looking at green, just the fact that most investors now have an ESG filter, that if you're not meeting certain criteria under ESG, even for a vanilla sukuk or bond, they're not going to look at it. And I think that that is something that is very, very key as we go forward. That you need to be looking at this. If you're looking at having a sustainable business, you need to be focused on ESG, and it's not just the environment; it's the social and the governance pieces as well.
John, what do you see as some of the challenges ahead? I mean, you've touched upon things related to looking for green assets and some of the regulatory issues. I know one of the challenges has been even finding a common definition of what is a green investment. So for the region, what do you see as some of the concerns that you have about how the market can develop and what it needs?
One of the key things is looking for an international standard, and that is something, I guess, globally that it is a little bit messy. Obviously, the EU has gone through their own taxonomy of what they are going to consider to be under ESG. You do have, as I talked about before, ICMA with their green bond principles that have evolved over the last 7 years since I've been involved in this market. And I guess if we can land on something that everyone can accept is a standard, and it does go to that, is it light green, dark green, or is it brown? Conversation that does occur out in the marketplace. The more that we can align, the better. I also think that, from my point of view, that if you really want to drive more of this type of behaviour, that regulation does need to change, and in particular, I think it has to come through from the banks, and therefore it comes from the central banks. Banks need to be given some incentives in regards to how they perhaps they're going to look at the risk-weighted asset perspective of offering loans, of being involved in being able to buy bonds, that they get some sort of capital benefit out of it. So therefore, it drives a price benefit, which is actually then going to attract more people to the market. The more we can do things like that, the better. In Australia, where I'm from, and I talked about the organisation that I was from, the government did take an initiative where they have the Clean Energy Corporation, which was there to lend money on a reduced interest rate as long as certain criteria were met. Now that was obviously a kickstarter for the Australian market, and we are starting to see more of that happen globally. And I think that's the sort of thing, incentives that are going to be needed there. I know when I sit on the Sustainable Finance Working Group here in Dubai, and you start talking to other corporates, treasuries in particular, the first thing that they get asked if they bring up to a green is, what's the pricing benefit to me? If there's no pricing benefit, or it's going to cost me because I've got to do some additional auditing, then some organizations are turning around going, well, it's not really worth the while. Now, obviously, we totally disagree with that, because if you look at return profiles of companies that have focused on ESG over the last 10 years or so, they have actually outperformed indexes. So it shows you that if you do focus on ESG, there are benefits for your organization in the long run, and that's where people need to focus.
Certainly, I think you make a really good point too about identifying what the opportunities are. Goldman Sachs did a report a few years ago looking at the Chinese market and the opportunities in investing in environmental goods and services, and believe that it's a $1 trillion opportunity a year. So there is money to be made in development of it, and it can be a driver of economic growth. And I agree with you that that's what investors need to see to continue to invest in these green opportunities. As we come to the end of this very interesting interview, I just wanted to go back to both of you, what you see ahead in sustainability for Majid Al Futtaim. What's next? How do you continue to be a leader in this field and inspire others for change?
Yes, I think the future looks exciting. We are on track and will accelerate our commitment to sustainability. If sustainability is important for us, I think post COVID 19, it's even more important. One of the lessons that we learned from COVID 19, by the way, and the whole world knows about this, no argument on that, is if one of us falls, we all fall. And this is exactly what sustainability will take care of. We will ensure that when it comes to socio-economic and environmental, we take care of the work and the business we do. The other part is we learned also from COVID-19 is prevention is better than cure. So we would ensure that the way we look on our design, our properties, It's being shared. We want to we want to see more people like us to join us in this journey, as well as more emphasis on using technology for good, and using AI to help us to achieve our targets. So we are making positive and good progress on our targets when it comes to net positive, single-use plastics. We will make sure that our 11 mid-term and long-term sustainable business commitments and materiality issues are being achieved, as well as launching our circular economy strategy. You talked about economic opportunities post COVID-19. Circular economy can launch more than $4.5 billion of opportunities in this part of the world. So that's a lot. As well as we'll be tackling our embodied carbon. So we'll go beyond our operational carbon, and we will be ensuring that our embedded carbon is being taken care of in our existing assets and our future assets. So again, I'm happy to report that we are on track, and we will accelerate our sustainability work within Majid Al Futtaim and within also our partners, inviting even more stakeholders and players to join us in this journey.
Great. Thank you, Ibrahim. John, would you like to add to that?
Well, I think just from a personal perspective to start with, it's about leaving this place in a better condition than where we joined it or we participated. So from that perspective, where Treasury comes in is to, really align ourselves with the sustainability of the business and to help progress that as much as we can. Now, whether that's through issuing further green, bonds or loans or sukuk, looking at perhaps more of an ESG type focus in looking at sustainability more generally. I think that's where we can help drive the agenda within this business, but also within this region. We have taken a leadership position here. It is an area where there is a great deal of focus, I have to say, from the different working groups that I'm aware of and in. And that's something that we continue to need to try and push to try and drive this agenda further. Because at the end of the day, we do need to leave this place in a better condition for the generations to come after we've gone.
Well said, and a good note to end on today. Ibrahim and John, this has been a wonderfully rich and insightful conversation. Thanks for sharing your story. Your firm has really been an inspiration to many in the region. We appreciate all that you're doing to create a more sustainable world. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us on Green Team Speaks To. To listen to more episodes and learn more about the Paulson Institute's work in green finance, please visit us at paulsoninstitute.org. See you next time.